Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I want to talk a little bit about this new documentary that is out. Hey Lisa, what's going on? Where is Wendy Williams? It's a four-part documentary, now available on Amazon Prime. Originally put out by Lifetime, and it's basically about the goings on in the life of Wendy Williams. It follows her around for a year, basically, and it's a year in her life, talking about the things that she is going through with her illness. Basically, they don't diagnose her in the documentary. They talk about her lipedema, which is her foot issue, and the issue with her eyes, which is the first thing that I noticed with regards to. I'm like, wow, what happened to her eyes? Because her eyes looked really bugged out. You know what I mean? Like her eyes looked crazy, basically. But then later on, it goes into in the documentary of why her eyes look like this. That she had actually mentioned it on her show, the Graves' disease, and everything, and how it was getting to her. And then she talks about her foot, and her foot was in terrible condition because of the lipedema. But uh, what stood out to me was not her medical conditions after that, but was how she was living. You know what I mean? The conditions that she was living, and particularly the people that were around her. Now, I gotta say, coming across uh, Will Shelby, who was her manager, I initially was thinking, okay, in the beginning, she hugs him. She says he's one of the greatest things to happen to her. I initially was thinking he's the bad guy because we've seen documentaries like this before. We've covered documentaries like this before on this channel, particularly the one about China, in where people are, and the story about Britney Spears, and people are surrounded by these yes men and yes women that tell them and give them whatever they want. So I'm initially thinking, okay, Will Shelby is like that with Wendy. Well, I was proven wrong because later in the documentary, he goes out of his way to prevent that that stuff from happening. And then I was thinking, okay, DJ DJ Roof, her DJ on the show is the guy, the bad guy. No, it was actually this other girl, Sean Sinoti. This girl was the publicist for Wendy. And this girl was one of the worst influences on Wendy's life. Okay, so a little bit of background. This is the second episode. I know I'm jumping ahead because the first episode, it really, Wendy's just going to therapy, showing how she treats people. And by the way, she treats people really shitty. You know what I mean? Her stylist, she yells at her. She calls her stupid. Her nail technician, she yells at her and she calls her stupid. She yells at pretty much everybody around her, and she really lashes out. The therapist, when the therapist wants to deal with her, she doesn't want to do pretty much anything. She makes the excuse of her feet. Now they do show her feet in the beginning, like I said, and her feet are in terrible condition, but still, he's trying to help her, trying to do various stretches with her, this physical therapist, and she's not letting him do anything. You know what I mean? And she seemed like she was really hard to deal with. So Will, he's doing a pretty good job. There's this one scene where they go to a restaurant and Wendy orders alcohol, and I forget what it is, what particular alcohol she orders, but anyway, the waiter's about to bring it to her. So then Will, he lies and says he's going in the bathroom, and he pulls the waiter aside and he says to him, "Listen, don't serve her any of the alcohol. Serve her a virgin drink, and she won't know the difference, right? He makes sure that when Wendy doesn't have any alcohol, because if she does, this they think that this is contributing to her deteriorating state. So that's one good thing he does. And then basically they go into uh, DJ Roof and him going to when they met Wendy on the show. DJ Roof talks about how it was with her with the pandemic, and they talk about what her life was like during the pandemic and how she really had a breakdown after the pandemic. Now they talk about the time that she collapsed on her show, but she collapsed on her show, she did bounce back. But it was really the pandemic that really got to her, like it did with a lot of other people. Once she was left alone in her crib just to do whatever the hell she wanted, and people really weren't watching over her like that, she was left to her own devices, and she really fell off the edge to the point where she was in stores falling asleep, passing out publicly, and basically everything that she had trashed other celebrities like Whitney Houston for, she was now the brunt of it. And this is something that they discuss in the documentary, how a lot of people felt like this was karma for the vicious comments that she had inflicted on other celebrities over the years, and how she had exposed their struggles when she herself had her own struggles. Now they talk about Kevin Hunter, her husband, and how um, he had met her when she was on the radio. He had met her when she had a severe drug problem with cocaine. She was getting high every day, and he had based well, yeah, ex-husband, really. So you're right, and he had basically taken control of her life because she seemed like she has a very immature personality. You know what I mean? And she needed somebody to guide her. But while the time he was also guiding her, he was also cheating on her with another woman, and he got another woman pregnant. And I felt like immediately when they started discussing the relationship, I was like, this is a codependent relationship. She feels like her life isn't worth anything if she doesn't have Kevin in her life. You know what I mean? She feels that was giving her motivation, that and her son. So with her son moving away to college and going to Miami, down to Miami to live with his grandparents and his other family members, including her niece Alex Finney, right? With her parents living down there in Miami, and her mom passing away, and the pandemic, and her losing her show, she was just having a, a meltdown. So anyway, get to this girl, Sean, right? This girl, Wendy's publicist. We first meet her in the second part. Yeah, Lisa says she let him cheat. Well, according to her best friend who they interviewed, she would pretend like she didn't act like what Kevin did, what was doing out there. She's like, oh, Kevin's just out working or whatever, because they interviewed her best friend, at least from California, her childhood friend, and the childhood friend said that Wendy was under the impression that he wasn't cheating. You know what I mean? And they interviewed the nephew, and the nephew said that even when he was a kid, he would go over there to play with his cousin. And when Wendy would do her show, then she'd lock herself in the room with a bottle of vodka and vape pens, and she wouldn't come out for 5 hours. You know what I mean? So maybe she knew implicitly that he was cheating, like she knew in her heart of heart he was cheating, and she kind of let him do it. But at the same time, even though okay, yeah, when they knew he was cheating, but you kind of, you don't want to face facts, and then the kid was the final last straw. But anyway, what, like I was saying about this girl, the publicist, we first meet her, and then Wendy's just insulting her, and I'm like, okay, Wendy does this because she wants to test people. She wants to test people's resolve. She insults everybody because she wants to see, can I insult them and them still come back? You know what I mean? So she's insulting the girl, and the girl's sitting there saying that she has thick skin, and I feel sorry. This documentary took me to the gambit of emotions because I'm sitting there, I'm feeling sorry for this girl, right? At first, right? I'm like, oh man, she's a young girl. She's just trying to, be Wendy's publicist, and Wendy's just attacking her and attacking her, and eventually, uh, you see Wendy's codependent side come out, and she befriends the girl. So now befriending this girl then has the notion. Well, Wendy already has the notion that she wants to go out to California to propose to NBC Universal another pilot for yet another show. Uh, Will, our other manager, has her doing normal shit like going to Asbury Park. That was a really sweet thing when she went back to Asbury Park, and even though she was having relapses in memory, when she saw her picture in the arcade place and she didn't really remember it. She didn't really remember when she got the street dedicated to her and she took a picture with that lady, some lady on her block, and then she went back to visit her childhood home because he was trying to get her to do constructive things, right? But this girl comes in the picture, and Wendy has this notion, oh, we're going to go to California. We're going to propose to NBC Studios that I want another show, and I'm gonna be on this show, not in the same wardrobe that I was before. I'm gonna be dressed like this. And guys, she's dressed in just a tube top, long stockings, and her boots. Like, there's no way in the world that any television producer would sign off on looking on a new show with her looking the way she looked, right? It's just impossible. So this girl takes her out to California, flies her out to California without Will knowing, and Will finds out later, and he just loses it because he's trying to keep track of her, because the Guardian, and they don't mention the Guardian's name. Every time they mention the Guardian's name, they block the Guardian out, like beep. You know what I mean? They're not, I guess, not allowed to mention it or whatever by court order, uh, having to do with her conservatorship. But without the Guardian knowing, she goes halfway around the country for this interview. And like I said, there's no way that she's ever going to get a new show. But the girl's gassing her up anyway. Takes her out to California. She goes on her Walk of Fame. They talk about when she got the Walk of Fame. Hardly anybody is recognizing her. The mobs have stopped following her around. Like, a few people took pictures with her, yeah, but it's not like it was. You know what I mean? She kind of looked unrecognizable to people. And then this girl has her out in a restaurant drinking. I mean, how irresponsible or uncaring do you have to be? And the waitress at the restaurant is saying, she's bringing up the incident of when Wendy had the blackout in the store and she fell asleep, and the publicist is trying to put her spin on it, saying, "Wait a minute," no, that wasn't what happened. Basically, telling Wendy what she wanted to hear, gassing her up, basically, right? And then Wendy is gonna not only show up in what she's like, show up in this getup that she's wearing. She's going to go into the NBC Universal studio with the producers there to pitch this new idea for a show. She's not even scheduled to have a new show, right? She's not even scheduled. and she's gonna show them her infected foot, and she does. They don't show that part, but obviously she got no calls back. But still, they take her back to New York, and they still have this girl still has her thinking that she has a show coming up that Wednesday. She's like, oh yeah, and she's going around telling people that she tells her father, Dad, I'm gonna be on TV uh, this Wednesday, and the father's like, but Wendy, it's already Wednesday. You mean next Wednesday? And then she just blacks out. Obviously, there was never any proposal for any show because her producers had made a deal with her that she could get back on television if she got her health in the right order, but she didn't. You know what I'm saying? She's all the way out on the West Coast, and it's so sad. Like two of the saddest parts, and they're in part one and part two, respectively. Two of the saddest parts, and both of them involve this girl, is she's going to this smoke shop to buy like a new vape pen, a blue vape pen. It's a smoke shop that she's going to all the time. And she says it's right by the Wendy Williams show. And they go to the same exact place, and they go in there, and the store owner says they don't have what she wants, but he does know who she is. And then she's cursing up a storm. She's saying it's not the place, it's not the place. Go by the Wendy Williams Sherry Shepherd show, in that area. They're telling her, Wendy, this is the place, this is the place. And then the other incident in Los Angeles where it's Oscar night. Now this is Wendy Williams. Her job was to report on all things entertainment. So they say, want to go to the Oscars? And she says, what's the Oscars? What's the Oscars? Sad, very sad. You know what I mean? But Wendy's family, especially her niece, Alex Finney, doesn't like this girl. She comes by and Wendy's looking for the remote. And she's like, I can't work this TV. I can't work this TV. So then the niece comes in. And you could tell that the niece doesn't like this girl. The girl goes to hug the niece. And the niece pulls away. And then the niece goes to the back to like where the cameras aren't. And she tells the producers, listen, why does this woman have to be next to my aunt when I speak to my own aunt? You know what I mean? Get this woman out of my face. I don't trust this woman. I don't like this woman, you know? And she has Wendy so convinced to actually fire Will and hire her as her new manager because she'll let Wendy do whatever she wants. She puts it as, okay, Wendy's a grown woman. I guess she's, seduced by a celebrity or whatever the case may be. And then another sad scene is when her stylist comes by and Wendy's supposed to be doing her podcast for the film, and she's just laying in bed. It's just after she came back from LA because people who deal with alcoholism, guys, there's no such thing in alcoholism as having one drink. Once you've reintroduced that, and trust me, I know, speaking from experience, once you've reintroduced that toxic drug into your body, you will go on binges and you will suffer the consequences and you will fall back into that addiction. And that's exactly what happens to Wendy here. To the point where the cats are neglected, clothes are everywhere when the stylist walks in. She's laying on the bed and she's passed out. You know what I mean? That's how much she's had to drink. She has passed out. See, Will, he caught her with a bottle one time. He said, look, this whole bottle is empty. Did you drink this whole bottle? Of course, she's gonna lie and say she just had a few. And then what he has to do every time they go into a hotel, he has to empty every single case. Right, exactly. Lisa's right. Lisa saying she was drunk at that point. The girl, I was under the impression that either the girl bought it for her or let her drink. I think the girl bought it for her because, as Wendy reiterates, her assets are entirely frozen. You know what I mean? I know she had cash on hand, and there's that scene, whatever. Maybe she bought it herself, but the point is, she should not be drinking. Every time uh, every time, there's a couple of times when they show Wendy drinking. I mean, excuse me, Wendy eating out with family, and the responsible family man, like when she goes to Miami, the responsible, and like it's like part four, part three, responsible family members, they say to the waiter, no, she's saying she wants this and that alcohol drink. Mm-mm. Give her Coca Cola. Like our nephew says in one scene, he says Coca Cola, Coca Cola. He tells him off to the side, and like the one I already said with the guy, Will, he tells the maitre d later, and on the plane too, when they go out to Miami, you know, tell her it's a apple sour, but it's really just apple juice, because you have to do that with her because she was such a bad alcoholic. She even describes her relationship with alcohol as a love of alcohol, a relationship with alcohol, as if alcohol is a person. She says about her sister Wanda, right? She says, uh, "I love Wanda, but Wanda doesn't understand my relationship with alcohol." In the very beginning, that she starts off with that. And she says, "I love a couple of things. I love Tito Puente and I love alcohol." I mean, just really weird stuff. And her family is wanting her, especially her son, to to go to Miami, to live in Miami. You know what I mean? Where she's safe, because she was in Miami a couple of years ago. She was in the super house that she came public with after the incident of fainting on stage, and she was doing really well. But as soon as she came back to New York, surrounded by sycophants, surrounded by people who didn't really care about her, only cared about her money and her assets, she was back into old habits. But with her conservativeship, they won't allow, according to this documentary, the family to take her to Miami because permanently to live, because they consider that kidnapping. Because of her conservatorship, she is now a ward of the state in New York State, because they consider even her son, who was her power of attorney, as not competent enough, because they go through several instances where the son allegedly made irresponsible purchases, but then he goes and he says later on he refutes that claim, and he says basically that his mom gave him free reign to do that. But they're saying that she was already diminished mental capacity when she signed over power of attorney to him. So therefore, making the power of attorney invalid. And at the end of the documentary, they claim that the 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 per, the person in charge of her conservatorship will not even let her speak to her family. The end of the documentary is the last part is really sad, guys, because she, all throughout this she's talking. All throughout the documentary, she's talking about selling her stuff, right? And I'm just thinking, okay, she just saying that. You know what I mean? That's just one of her ramblings, because I deal with my grandma who has Alzheimer's, and she has, diminished mental capacity. And sometimes, like, the the conversation that Wendy has in the documentary with her niece, and she's just ranting and raving in the bed in Miami. It's like, okay, yeah, I can kind of understand that. I mean, like when she's talking about, she'll sell her wigs and everything, and she'll get them for money. I'm just thinking she's not really gonna do that. But in actuality, in the end of at the end of the documentary, when Will comes back to the crib, it's like everything is gone. Like all her stuff is gone. The apartment in New York is completely empty. And towards the end, I think they said that they put her in a living facility or something. You know what I mean? But the conservatorship, the one in charge of her, won't even let her speak to her family. Like the family has her on the phone, but the sister, and then she goes into a little bit of how conservatorship this really is. And they talk a little bit about the Britney Spears case, which Wendy herself covered when she was on the Wendy Williams show, and which we talked about also on this channel. But which is another famous conservatorship case. But I think this one is even worse because here you have a person who is lost, a person who is crying out for help, a person who is broken, a person who is destroyed. I mean, I have to say that Britney Spears, okay, Lisa is correct. I'm sorry. I thought it was some kind of facility. At the end, they put her in the hospital, and that's how they found out she had frontal temporal dementia. Okay, yeah. Because she was forgetting a lot of stuff. She was not remembering certain recollections, but I found it interesting that she did remember when she says she would always repeat the phrase 6 years old in Asbury Park, 6 years old in Asbury Park. In other words, she wanted to be on the radio since she was 6 years old. And she's looking through the photo album with her dad, and she says to her dad, "Remember when I was 6 years old, and I said radio, 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 radio." You know what I mean? She just wanted that. But like I'm saying, uh, she yeah, and aphasia. She was crying out for help. She was basically wanting somebody to help her, and nobody around her. Again, like I always say, and you see it with a lot of these celebrities, these enablers, these people that are sycophants, hangers on, people that are yes men and yes women, and the Sun talks about it. He says yes, people, exactly. And you see him with every single celebrity that you ever see that has a problem with alcohol, drugs, even overeating, binge eating like Big Pun. You see him with people that are more enamored with the celebrity part of the person than actually the human part of the person, and are sycophants, are people that hang on to this person and suck the life out of this person, both financially and physically. And they won't tell the person no, they'll give the person whatever they want. And ultimately, this leads to eventually the person's demise. We saw it in Michael Jackson, we saw it in Big Pun, we saw it in wrestlers like Scott Hall, like Virgil, and we're seeing it, especially if they have money. You're right, Lisa. Whitney had people like that. They'll give them whatever they want because they have money. You know what I mean? And they're enamored with their money and their fame and their celebrity. People won't tell them no. People will keep telling them yeah, and will have them go against their doctor's orders. I mean, Wendy here was convinced that she didn't even need to go to a doctor. You know what I mean? That she was, in the beginning, she says, "Oh, fuck a psychiatrist," she says. "I don't need a psychiatrist. What I need a psychiatrist for, I need to get my money from Wells Fargo, which has frozen my assets." She was under the impression that her money was in Wells Fargo. But with this conservativeship BS, like, how is the government any more responsible than a person with, who, like a person's family members? People's family members should be the ones in charge of their assets, their close ones, their loved ones, not the people that are in the government. What good is her assets going to do her there? She's going to need a lot of care, now that she has this. And it's just really sad because she was such a trailblazer in daytime talk show, in the daytime talk show arena. 14 years is nothing to sneeze at. That is a long run for a talk show. And she had anybody who was anybody on there. And she was brilliant. And the thing was that she is no longer herself. Here you have a woman who made her living off of talking. She made her living off of communicating. She was a wonderful communicator, a great communicator. At least it does, right? I don't know how they just passed by people in her family to take care of her. Yeah, they claimed her family was unfit, which is BS. But she was a great communicator. Black China, the the part with Black China when Black China visits her, Black China, Rob Kardashian's ex, talks about how she didn't like Wendy at first because Wendy said that she was a woman of the pole, right? Basically a stripper, you know. But then she went on the couch and she got to know her and they became good friends. And, you know, and it's just heartbreaking, like when she took the wig off and you start to see, like, how her health is just diminishing. But, like, right, Lisa, me too. Uh, because she wants so badly to be back in the game. She believes that she has one more chance in it, but she really doesn't, guys. What I mean? We've kind of heard the last from her, unfortunately. What I mean? Because the illness, just like with Bruce Willis's case, the illness seems to be progressing pretty fast. We don't know a lot about the Bruce Willis specific case, but with the Wendy Williams case, it seems to be progressing pretty fast. I mean, just in the space of this documentary, which was 1 year, she went from being pretty coherent to being not all that coherent at all. You could see that she had her times. And, you know, she, like I said, she blazed a trail. She took daytime TV to a whole nother level. What I mean? Just that in person style talk show, not the kind of talk show like that was really salacious, like the Jerry Springer ish type or anything. Just sitting down with celebrities, talking it over with celebrities, getting to know them. Basically, that was her phrase. How you doing? You know what I mean? Like getting to know celebrities on a real personal level. And she innovated that. She invented that type of that type of talk show, at least for the daytime. What I mean? Things like that had always existed in the night. Johnny Carson, Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Kimmel, and whatever, even Arsenio Hall. But for the daytime, that was never really on the air before she was. And like I said, 14 years on the air is nothing to sneeze at. You'll be lucky if you get 2 or 3 seasons. So here's a woman who relied a lot on her vocal abilities, uh, for her whole life on her vocal abilities, her whole life on her personality that was very outgoing, very out front, very abrasive, as they say in the documentary. And now it's sort of like Muhammad Ali, guys. She doesn't have that personality anymore. She's no longer her. And that's the biggest thing that I think that is the worst thing about dealing with someone that has right. Lisa is saying the guardianship didn't want the documentary to be seen, and I think that yeah, because just like her sister said, it's a broken system, and they had lawyers in there talking about that what happened to Wendy Williams, that one lady lawyer, and they had some elder care specialist guy in there talking about, and it's just like they don't care about these people, you know, they don't care what happens to them or anything. You know what I mean? They're just money to the state. You know, they just want to seize their assets and take control of them and deem them as not fit to take care of themselves, and their family is not fit to take care of themselves. All because of something that they heard in some tabloids that is unsubstantiated. They probably heard about our son's financial irresponsibility from freaking a tabloid. You know what I mean? They don't really know if the son is financially responsible or not. That they have the records of that? You know what I mean? They just want to take her money and take away her assets. Reminds me of, there's a movie starring Peter Dinklage uh, of Game of Thrones fame called We Care a Lot, where um, the city had seized his mother's assets and put her in a nursing facility. And meanwhile, she didn't need to be put into a nursing facility and have guardianship just like this. You know, this happens. Uh, this happens a lot with people, and this is fucked up and really sad. You know what I mean? But it's really sad to see Wendy Williams like this. I remember Wendy Williams when she was on the radio. I went to the Black Family Reunion Carnival in Prospect Park, Brooklyn, back when she was on I-97. I I tried to dunk her in one of those dunking tanks, and I got to meet her. Um, in 90, like I said, in 97. Lisa says it happens a lot with people with disabilities. And sure it does, Lisa. You know what I mean? Because, you know, people with disabilities and the elderly, a lot of times their families don't care. But it seems like with Wendy Williams' family, they do care. And they want to help her out and they want her to be around family. Like her dad is saying in the documentary that uh, they want her to be in Miami with her family. You know what I mean? In the cases with people with disabilities, when they get in situations like this, a lot of times the family is either unable or unwilling to take care of that person. But in Wendy's case, it seems like it's not the family that doesn't want anything to do with it. It's the guardian. The guardian is pushing hard. The family is not capable. The family is not capable either. You know what I mean? So I think it's more of a legal battle. And I hope that the family continues to push forward and they continue to fight this BS on behalf of Wendy and they actually win. It took Britney Spears a very long time to fight for ownership of her own self and person. Yeah, this is it's true. At the end of the documentary, I believe it said the review of the guardianship is up for review next year. So of course they'll keep fighting. Hopefully, uh, hopefully they win. And the best part of the documentary is when she saw the people in Asbury Park when she had grown up, and she saw them, and they came up to her car and they said, "We're praying for you. We're praying for you, Wendy." To let her know that she was still loved, by her fans, still adored by her fans. And people in LA asked her, when is she coming back on TV? True, yeah. Lisa says, I hope that true Wendy fans protest for Wendy like Britney fans did for her. I hope so too. Because to me, her case is far more tragic because of what she's going through, with her illness and stuff. And as it progressed, unfortunately, she won't be able to make those kind of decisions. She'll be completely gone. You know what I mean? Whereas Britney Spears' case, I don't even know why her father was guardianship over her. She was having emotional issues. What Wendy's having is real physical and psychological issues, and it's just showing you the importance. People, guys, staying away from substance abuse if you can. Anybody out there, stay away from alcohol, stay away from drugs because they do a number on your brain. You know what I mean? And you might not see it today, you might not see it tomorrow, but you'll definitely see it in the future. That alcohol and drugs, specifically alcohol in Wendy's case, diminished her and contributed to her getting that. You know what I mean? Not that it was the cause of it, but it contributed to it. It was brought on by her alcoholism. So stay away from that kind of stuff, guys, if you can, because it just destroys lives and it diminishes your quality of life. So let's keep Wendy Williams in our prayers, and her family. And not just her, but even people with less fame than her. You know what I mean? People that are going through the exact same thing that she's going through right now, fighting for their right to live, fighting for their right to exist, fighting for their self ownership, their right to self determination, their right to determine their own place in this world, and people that love them to determine their own place in this world, not having the state on their backs and on their necks. Uh, because we are we are not a people. We are not a government with a people. We are a people with a government. And we have to force the government and the state to fight for the rights of the individual and the dignity of the individual rather than the dignity of a state. Because the state is just an entity created by people. People are not an entity created by a state. Lisa says, do I think the documentary was necessary? Yes, because seeing it, visual aids, Lisa, when people see things and people see the egregiousness of certain situations, it calls attention to the situation. And unfortunately, in the celebrity driven culture that we live in, a lot of times particular situations are never called to attention unless documentary films are made about them, and they involve famous people. You know what I'm saying? Like for example, will we know will we know as much about HIV and AIDS advocacy if Magic Johnson didn't have it? No, we probably wouldn't. Will we know as much about ALS if Lou Gehrig didn't have it? No, we probably wouldn't. So this could call attention not just to Wendy's situation as far as conservatorship, because Britney Spears' situation already did that, but it can also call attention to her illness and the illness that she's struggling, and other families that are less fortunate than she and less prominently well known than she are dealing with. You know what I mean? And people may want to look into it and become an advocate for it because they're a fan of Wendy Williams. No, I wasn't exploiting her. I mean, wasn't showing her at the most vulnerable moments, but this is the reality that she's dealing with. You know what I mean? The people that said that it was exploiting her were the people that were exploiting her. It was only shining the camera on people like Sean Zanotti who were freaking. I mean, because that's who's complaining about it, the publicist. one of the most prominent voices complaining about the documentary is that lady, that publicist. So of course she's complaining because it's shining a light brighter than the light I have here on my desk on Wendy Williams' situation, on who's exploiting her and who's taking advantage of her, who's taking her money and who's using her for their own benefit. It's people like this enabling her. I mean, look how thin, look how frail she was. She obviously hadn't eaten in days, just plying her full with liquor and keeping her in that bedroom. So a documentary like this needed to be made. It needed to shine light on what was going on with her. Because okay, Lisa gonna okay. Okay. Yeah, I just got it, Lisa. Lisa just sent me this article talking um, about uh, the girl Sean and how she had resigned. I didn't read the whole thing, Lisa, but I just skimmed through it. And the girl had resigned as Wendy's publicist, because obviously, look what she did. Anyway, we're gonna have to make that a separate video, guys, when I actually read that article in its entirety, and I'm able to talk about the follow up to this, because this is going to be an ongoing saga that I'm probably going to keep following. Just because it's so interesting to see, and just because I always was. Well, I never really watched Wendy's show on television, but I was a fan of her back in the day on radio. And she looked so different back then. Okay, yeah, Sean and Will no longer work with Wendy. Well, yeah, they don't need to. I don't think Will was exploitive. I think Shauna was definitely exploitive. She was. Had she been with Wendy any longer, Wendy might have not been alive. That's how bad this was, guys. Really, this lady and Wendy Williams, what this lady was doing to Wendy Williams would have killed Wendy. She was actually taking Wendy out partying and getting her drunk at 59 years old with alcohol-induced dementia. Really. And Will, he bears some of the blame too, and no cap, guys, because he was supposed to be watching her, and all of a sudden she's on the West Coast, and he doesn't know about it. That seemed kind of fishy to me as well. Yeah, she didn't tell him, but you had to. I mean, he should know her. You know what I mean? He should know that she's the type of person, she wants to do what she wants to do. She's gonna do what she's gonna do, and you have to keep tabs on her at all times. You know what I mean? You can't let her out of your sight. You know what I mean? Because I mean, I don't know if he has a family. I don't know about his life, but I'm just saying she pulled her and Sean pulled one over on Will. You know what I mean? So he kind of fell asleep at the wheel, and they took advantage of that, and they went out to California and partied. Right? He did. He trusted her. He didn't trust her at the end because he's like you don't even know who she is. But I'm saying he was given charge of her, and he let her go to the West Coast. I mean, it wasn't like she went out to the store, Lisa, you know what I mean, down the block. She went to the West Coast, you know, several states away. You know what I mean? If I'm her son or I'm her dad, you know what I mean, or I'm her niece or I'm her nephew, I'm like, how could you drop the ball so severely? You know what I mean? But she was looking for that friendship. She was looking for that codependency that she used to have with Kevin, you know, of somebody to tell her to go here and go there. For it seems like for her whole life, she had to have some sort of disciplinarian, some sort of person to step in and say, Wendy, do this, Wendy, don't do that. Because as fucked up as his dad was, Kevin Jr., like what his dad did, cheating on his mom and stuff, Kevin Jr., the son, he did give his dad props in a way that he said his dad always made sure that she was at work on time, doing her doing her show on time, and sober when she did her stuff when he was married to her. So, and the nephew said the exact same thing. Now, I don't know about you, Lise, but the brother seemed like he also had an alcohol problem because there was one scene where the dad, like before Wendy even got there, and the brother's talking about some, you know, yeah, Wendy's brother. He's talking about ordering some alcohol, and the father's like, "Don't you think you've had enough?" To the brother, and the brother and Wendy were best friends growing up by her own admission and by his own admission. So I'm thinking maybe he has some sort of alcohol problem as well. You know what I'm saying? Because like if the dad's telling him, okay, you've had enough, don't you think you've had too many already? And Wendy's not even there, so he's not talking to Wendy. You know what I mean? She hadn't even gotten to the table yet. He's talking to the brother. So the brother might have some sort of alcohol issues too. You know what I mean? It might be something that runs in the family. Yep. Because they only show him a small part in the documentary, but it's a really poignant part that stuck out to me that I remember. Um, but yeah, her son is a really self-sacrificing son. I really got to give it up to him. I was thinking that this initially from the trailer, I thought the sister was the bad guy. You know what I mean? Lisa and I actually got into it too, talking about this. because from the trailer, I could have swore that before I watched it, that from the trailer, I was gonna immediately think the sister was the culprit here because a lot of times it is a family member taking advantage of you, like in Britney Spears' case, you know. But I got to give the sister and none for nine guys. I don't know if voices are genetic, but when it came to the sister, if I closed my eyes and I didn't see what the sister looked like, I would have swore that was Wendy Williams talking. Their voices are completely identical, in my opinion. She does she doesn't really need to do an impression of her sister. Yep, I never looked into whether voices are actually genetic. You know what I mean? You know how brothers and sisters or whatever sound, do they sound alike? But since Wendy Williams was a radio personality first, and I was more familiar with her on radio than I was with her on television, I was very familiar with her voice and her voice patterns and her speaking patterns and her cadence. So I'm like, wait a minute, is this Wendy speaking or is this Wanda Williams speaking? You know, and then I had to look up because I glanced at my phone for a minute, and I had to look up, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not Wendy, that's the sister. Wow, the sister has an identical voice. Amazing. But yeah, the sister seemed really caring. Yeah, the mom too. Yeah, they talked a lot about the mom. You know, they Whitney had really loving, caring parents too. That that I could say. You know, she grew up in a very nurturing home in Asbury Park, New Jersey, close by to Oakhurst, New Jersey, where I went to camp. Wrestling fans on here would know Asbury Park, New Jersey, as a home of another famous New Jersey and Bam Bam Bagel. But yeah, it's a really small, tight knit community right near the boardwalk in Point Pleasant, where I camp. When I went to camp, they used to take us on field trips to really nice part of New Jersey. It's like our family community was really cool. I remember reading in her book years ago that she dealt with. Oh, they won the talk show a few times. Okay, I never watched the talk show, but I remember reading in her book that she had dealt with racism a lot too growing up. Yeah, her first book. Yeah, and she had dealt with a lot of racism growing up because at that time, Asbury Park, New Jersey, where she had grown up, was predominantly white community, and like she was one of the only African American girls on her whole block. You know what I mean? And that's what really made her really outspoken. And she had always admired Howard Stern when she got into radio, and she wanted to be like another Howard Stern, a shock jock type, and that's what she eventually became. Like I said, when I saw on TV years later, and when she had the Wendy Williams show, I was completely astonished by how different she was. You know what I mean? If you remember her from radio, at least on BLS or Kiss FM, I'm not old enough for the Kiss and Tell program. That was way back, like that was the '80s. But I remember her from Hot 97, and she was totally different. You know, and she looked totally different. She acted totally different. Her television personality was, I believe, it was a real personality, but it it was remade over, like she reinvented herself, you know, and she was, and a lot of it had to do with her husband's input. Like somebody said, her husband was a rock. She put her husband before anybody, even herself. And when he left her, that's when she just fell apart, you know? And when you do that, and you're in a relationship, that's bad. You know what I mean? Because you can't put, yeah, Lisa's correct. She had to calm it down when she got on the radio. She couldn't say the stuff that she said on TV, on the radio. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Her interviews weren't as good. Her best material, of course, with the late Whitney Houston, that is her most notorious. But look, I'm not trying to back her up or anything. We did the Whitney, I mean the not the Whitney, the Wendy Williams movie that she did a while ago on Lifetime. I think we talked about some of the original Wendy movie. I don't know if we talked about not the one that was in theaters that we did the review on. We never talked about the one she was involved with. Wendy Williams was involved with the Whitney movie. But listen, some of the things that she has said about certain celebrities, she was vindicated in the end. Not necessarily Whitney Houston, but other celebrities like Puffy. For years, Wendy Williams was exposing Puffy on the radio, like going all the way back to the 90s. Okay? The things that people are acting surprised about right now when it comes to P. Diddy, they call him now, but back then they called him Puffy. Puffy, Sean Combs, is the exact same things that Wendy Williams have been saying all these years. You know what I mean? If Wendy were in her right mental capacity, I know she would say, I told, don't say, I don't, not the type to say I told you so, but I told you so. The things about being sexually abusive, the things about being sexually exploitative, the, the things about being gay and on the down low. That was all true. What else was all true? Pepper and Trench. That Trench was abusive to Pepper. That turned out to be true. So a lot of things that she has said about celebrities over the years that people said, oh, Wendy would, like back in the 90s, they tried to defend these celebrities. And even the stuff she said about Whitney. You know what I mean? Whitney didn't like it because it was true. It hit a nerve with her. But it was true. You know what I mean? She wanted to beat her up, her and Robin Crawford, up there in the radio because it hit a nerve with you. The stuff that we were saying about also Whitney being on the DL, Whitney having a lesbian relationship with Robin Crawford, that was true. But Bobby Brown cheating on Whitney Houston, that was true. It was all true. You know what I mean? So back, a lot of us owe Wendy Williams an apology, guys, because we defended these celebrities thinking that she was just making shit up, thinking that she was gossiping, thinking that she was causing trouble. But later on, it came out this stuff was actually true. This stuff was going on. Then later on, these celebrities had movies themselves and admitted. And now we're seeing with Puffy's scandal, particularly Puffy's scandal, that it was true about him too. You know what I'm saying? It was all true. You know what I mean? So we owe her an apology. You know, she was in the end, she was a legit journalist. She was in the end bringing out shit that other journalists were afraid to bring out, talking about shit that other journalists were afraid to talk about. And she wasn't afraid to to confront these celebrities and to take these threats from people like Whitney Houston, people like Pepper, and people like Puffy, legal threats and sometimes physical threats. Because that's what journalists do. Journalists uncover truth despite who likes it and who don't like it. Because Journalists have to tell the truth. That's part of being a journalist, telling the truth and exposing the truth for what it is, regardless to whom or what likes it. And she was willing to go in there and go in the trenches and do the dirt and tell us the things that we didn't want to hear, that were uncomfortable about these certain celebrities at a time when we weren't ready to hear it. And we took their side and we made her out to be the bad guy. But in the end, she was proven right. Because you don't want journalists that just sit there and tell the artist what they want to hear, or people like Barbara Walters or Diane Sawyer that they'll talk about it when it was already known. You know, Wendy was telling us this shit in the 90s. She was telling us all their secrets and all their dirt back in the 90s. And that's why they ran off radio and they ran onto TV, right? The early 90s. They ran off radio and they ran her into TV because she was too dangerous for radio. She was always getting into fights with artists. We saw it with Whitney Houston. We saw it with Pepper, particularly the female artist that wanted to fight her, and the male artist that wanted to sue her. But but most of the time, the shit she was saying was true. So come on, she deserves her flowers. She was a true journalist. She was probably the only true journalist in hip hop, the only true DJ willing to, in High 97, I don't know, and in BLS, in any of the stations, willing to ask the real questions, the questions that people really wanted to know about, not the fluff questions. And I love her. Don't get me wrong, but Angie Martinez would ask. I love Angie Mar. You know what I mean? But Angie Martinez, she would, on her station, on her show, she would go up there and she would ask softball questions, funk flex too. They would ask questions that nobody wanted to hear, not the hard questions that would make the artist uncomfortable. You know, they would they basically, the artist go up there and they kiss the artist's ass. You know what I mean? Like, what good is that? Wendy was willing to go into the um, to to go into the trenches and ask the questions that nobody else wanted to ask, and take the hits and take the threats and take the cancellation and takes the lawsuits. But also, one thing about Wendy, and even in the infamous phone conversation with Whitney Houston, Whitney, but in the phone conversation with Whitney Houston, where Whitney threatens her, Whitney admits she had her own problems with drugs. She's never been the type to hide her substance abuse problems on the radio. She came right out and she told everything. She laid her cards bare, so nobody could call her a hypocrite. Nobody could say, "Oh, you're a hypocrite. You're calling out this person and that person for this kind of misconduct or that kind of misconduct," particularly with substance abuse, when she's been perfectly candid and perfectly honest from the very beginning about her shit, the shit that she's going through. And even in that confrontation, she was. You know what I mean? She told Wendy, "Look, I went through my own issues. I'm not here to condemn you, but I'm just here to ask you, is this true?" You know what I mean? And as the old saying goes, a hit dog hollers. You know, and the reason why the late Whitney Houston got upset about it is because it was true. You know, the marital problems were true, the drug problems were true, the lesbian rumors, they were true. Puffy too. You know what I mean? But in the end, we called it shock jock journalism. We called it whatever, call it what you want to call it, but it wasn't shock jock journalism for shock jock journalism's sake. It wasn't like Star and Buck. It wasn't even like Howard Stern, who she had set out to be like, because those people, they don't they don't set out to expose anybody. They don't set out to any of that kind of stuff. What they set out to do is just make jokes at people's expense and promote cruelty, you know, at people's expense. Wendy never did that, to my knowledge. I mean, yeah, She had her moments. I mean, who's perfect in this life? You know what I mean? When we all die, when we all go through problems, people are all going to look back at us one way or another and say you did this and you did that and you were a hypocrite in this way. But to me, in my opinion, she laid her cards bare. Like I said, we knew about Wendy's struggles. Um, you know, with cocaine and with alcohol from her radio show. How many of these other DJs went through stuff? For example, look at Mr. C. Mr. C on Hot 97, he led a completely other life. You know that he denied till he couldn't deny it anymore. You know, so I completely give her the credit. Was she perfect? No, but she blazed the trail. She blazed the trail for women journalists in hip hop. In a way, she was the first hip hop journalist, really, or one of the first on the radio, and the only one willing to speak the truth to these artists. Who's gonna be that? Who's gonna be that voice now that she's gone? You know, nobody. I get so aggravated with interviewers that they interview people and they just tell them what they want to hear. And it's a boring interview because there's no confrontation, there's no pushback. An artist will come up there and they'll spit their bullshit because artists do that. Artists are, especially the big artists like the Taylor Swifts, the Drakes, the Beyoncés. You know what I'm saying? They're controlled in what they say. You know what I mean? They're very controlled in what they say and they're very controlled in what they can ask. And the journalist, who's supposed to be a journalist, that's the role of a journalist, like I said, to push back on what the artist is saying, push back on what's the narrative, to get them, to make them uncomfortable, not to make them comfortable. You make them comfortable, what's the point? We're just sitting there kissing each other's ass for uh, 30 to 45 minutes and nothing is really getting answered. You know what I mean? That's why I get upset with these interviewers because nobody's willing to ask the real questions. You know, Drink Champs does it somewhat, but even they, you know, they're so enamored with the artist and so in love with the artist that they don't actually make the artist uncomfortable. You have to make them uncomfortable. You know what I mean? You have to ask these questions, especially in an era that we live in today where the veil of celebrity is shrouded in such secrecy. But anyway, hats off to Lisa. Tasha K is one of those that there's DJ Academics is too. But I'm thinking more along the lines, Lisa Vlad and people like that. You know, I be getting so aggravated with their interviews because, okay, like, what are you really asking? But yeah, Lisa, Wendy Williams plays Braids the Trail. Hats off to Wendy Williams for being a pioneer in this game of Gladys Police, in this game of journalism, particularly hip hop journalism and entertainment news. And you know what? There'll never be another. You were the first in the long, you were the first, and there'll never be another one like you because you did it, you did it the best. You know, and I think, to me, guys, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but I'm gonna throw this one out there. Some of the people in the entertainment industry, they don't like a person like Wendy Williams, and they'll try to do everything they can to destroy her. You know what I'm saying? And I'll just leave it at that. I'm not saying that She has no accountability. I'm not saying that she was not a culprit in her own destruction. Obviously, she had her own problems. You know, she was never, like I said, she was never shy about sharing that. But somebody who is so abrasive, particularly a woman of color, that is very abrasive and in your face and willing to ask questions that the rich and powerful don't want, it's conceivable that an industry that's such as control, such as the entertainment industry, would want to destroy a woman like this and bring her down any way she can and use the strong arm of the law to do so. You know what I mean? They're just lucky that she stuck to entertainment and she never got into politics. Because if she'd have gotten into politics and harder journalism, interviewing politicians and celebrities, and got away from soft journalism, which was her specialty, which is they consider entertainment as soft journalism. If she'd have gotten into harder journalism, they'd have really been in trouble, and she'd have really been in trouble, and she'd have been gone a long time before that. You know what I mean? Because there you're uncovering an industry that is has more dirt in it than 10 times more dirt in it than the entertainment industry, and they'll destroy you even faster. You know what I mean? So they're just lucky somebody like Wendy's personality and Wendy's abrasive attitude never got into political journalism. Because if they did, if she if she did, you she'd have been gone a long time ago. So it's just the way it is. Peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love you guys. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing. And once again, hats off to Wendy Williams for being a trailblazer in journalism. I love you for that. And I'll never forget the time when I met you in '97. And I said to you, right before I tried to dunk in the tank, unsuccessfully, by the way, uh, yeah, I mean, nobody said I was right. Nobody said I was Roger Clemens, but anyway, um, I said to you, I listen to you every day, and you inspire me to want to work on the radio in the future and work in journalism in the future. So hats off to Wendy Williams. Love you. Peace.